Greetings all, and welcome to the 35th episode of the VTP, or the Veteran Trainer's Perspective. Today, we're going to be examining one of the most basic features in the life of a Pokemon trainer that are aiming to be the best and show the world what they can really do with their preferred partners at their side. Yes, today, we are going to be taking a look at the existence of the Pokémon League within regions, and specifically, a look at the culture that surrounds gym leaders, including where they come from, how they can acquire their position, what the job entails, and how they in turn function as part of any given region's Pokémon League. Competitive battling in all of its forms is something that has seemingly existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years, but it is only in modern times that it seems to become a global feature that is present in many different regions across the world.
Battling with Pokemon, while a foreign concept to many in ancient times, has become iconic not only as a friendly sport, but more importantly as a way for trainers to show the bonds they share with their Pokemon and the power they can draw forth from those bonds in the heat of conflict. However, in olden times, these sorts of fights were commonly unregulated, and because of this, instead of simply knocking out an opponent's Pokemon, battles could oftentimes lead to the death of Pokemon, and in turn great tragedies for those that had spent so much of their lives raising and nurturing their partners to that point. In order to make it so these sorts of battles could still be held, but in a fashion that could regulate combat in professional settings, and in turn preserve the lives of both Pokemon and people alike, the standard Pokémon League was first introduced in the early 1900s, and quickly became the mainstay for trainers of all sorts across a great number of countries and regions. Within these leagues, trainers are tasked with climbing the ranks within the system in order to find and challenge the greatest trainers in a given region to show their skills as Pokemon trainers, and what kinds of fighters they can bring to the table. On the one hand, this is still considered both a hobby and a sport depending on how seriously one takes their time as a trainer, and thus is meant to be friendly insomuch as to ensure that the general health of those engaged in a battle is kept in mind when directing one's Pokemon to attack an opponent. On the other hand though, it is a sport at the forefront, as the major tournaments that truly determine the strongest in a region are usually publicized events, with even normal gym battles being a huge spectator sport in places like the Galar region, even if the stakes there are a lot lower than in larger tournaments. In order to further help regulate the types of trainers that can be put on center stage in major tournament-style battles, a filtering system of sorts was designed in order to weed out weaker and less experienced trainers and ensure that any battles that occur with public spectacle could be ones that the audience would be thrilled to see, two fighters of great skill using their Pokemon to the maximum to win their fights. As such, this resulted in the creation of gym leaders in most regions where a Pokemon League is located, and in turn the badge system that has become a staple of the entire league system.
In speaking on badges, it is true that anyone with a bit of a silver tongue could likely make up a story of some sort to get people to believe that they actually went out and beat a gym leader. So in order to combat this simple attempt at a lie by anyone, the Pokemon League system adopted the use of what are commonly called gym badges to counter this.
These badges are awarded to trainers by gym leaders for defeating them in battle, or in extreme cases in being able to demonstrate their proficiency as a trainer enough to make the effort worthy of being awarded said badge. In the vast majority of cases, the standard for this is that trainers must defeat and acquire the badges from at least 8 different gym leaders in order to qualify for any matches with the greater officials and trainers within the higher tiers of the Pokemon League system. It doesn't really matter who gave the badge or how they were earned, just that they were obtained and can be provided as evidence to others that one has actually completed the gym leader challenge in a region. It is not currently known exactly why 8 was chosen as an arbitrary number for the gym badges, as there are not a lot of normal cases where more than 8 gym leaders might be present in a region at any given time, which I will talk more about in a bit, but the number seems to work well for the system as a standard and has held up mostly unchallenged over time. However, it is important to note that in the main series games, for a time, these badges had some additional effects to them once they were obtained. Original modules for badges from places like the Kanto region actually had a small transmitter inside of them that could generate an energy signature that would remotely boost the power of certain stats with one's Pokemon to a small degree, and models just a few years later could even boost the power of the types of moves to give a different sort of benefit and reward for making the most of one's time as a trainer. However, these devices were eventually halted as a standard because it made battles imbalanced under certain circumstances, and in turn could give challenging trainers a bit of an unfair advantage against future gym leaders. As such, standard badges these days serve purely a symbolic function, as a way of seeing a trainer's prowess in their field. Despite this, the objects have come in many different forms, styles, and even materials for construction over the years, oftentimes dependent upon the region where they are created, and while they may only be worth something within the specific regional leagues they are created within, they have stood the test of time as the easiest and most reliable way to vet the true skills of an individual as a Pokemon trainer outside direct footage of their wins.
Now, I'm sure that many are curious and are asking themselves how exactly one even becomes a gym leader, let alone any sort of rank above that, and the answer is, Well, the process is actually a little bit messy and might not even directly apply to a region depending on the local culture.
Normally, one would assume that gym leaders acquire the rank as part of some sort of training program or because they can prove they are strong enough to take the job, but there are a lot of other factors that come into play here, including geography, relative experience level, type specialties, familial connections, and local culture. First of all, gym leaders need to be able to be strong, but it is also important for them to be actually available in an area for long periods of time to take on what is often a long string of continuous challenges at the doorstep of their gym. As such, it is very common for gym leaders to actually be residents in whatever town or city their gym is within, so it is easy for them to live and commute to and from work across the breadth of whatever area they call home. Secondly, their relative experience level matters a great deal when it comes to where and how they are assigned. As while the strongest possible trainers in an area often end up with the roles of gym leaders, there is a system in place that does tend to make certain gym leaders more difficult to handle and beat than others. In the main series games, this is mainly done as a way of providing a path of progress for players, but in a more relative setting, it is quite possible that there is a system in place that ensures that, while gym leaders are to be experienced in their talents, they also have to be able to match a difficulty gradient of some sort and only use certain types of Pokemon that can be seen as fair relative to the overall experience level and skills of local trainers in turn. It's also been seen that many gym leaders will often use different Pokemon teams depending on the skill level of a challenger, but that is a detail with enough meat to it to deserve its own explanation later in the video. Type specialties are yet another factor that can have an impact, as is regulation law that almost all gym leaders must specialize in only a single elemental type for their gyms and use that to define the real challenge of their gym battles. This can depend on the local environment as well, as some species may be more common to find in certain wild and urban areas than others, and could thus influence what types they specialize in, though this doesn't always pan out in practice. Familial connections also play a noteworthy part in how gym leaders are assigned, as it's not uncommon that gym leaders with children, relatives, or even protégés can pass their gym duties down to them, and this is actually a lot more common than some might initially think. While the duties of a gym leader might be theirs and theirs alone to handle normally, it is possible that they can actually train a family member of some sort, whether they be direct blood or otherwise a close protégé, in order to eventually take up the mantle they currently hold when they decide to ultimately retire. This can result in less experienced trainers taking up the reins in these cases, but there is enough wiggle room in the system that any potential drop in battle quality or a change in difficulty can eventually be meted out in time. Lastly here, it's important to make further note that while the system might be fairly universal, there are some regions that don't even have gym leaders at all, the Alola region being a prime example. Instead of the traditional gym system seen in other regions, this region has been allowed to instead continue to feature its Native Island Challenge, a more complex series of trials and battles that pits trainers against not just major leaders on the different islands of the region, but also powerful totem Pokemon that act as guardians for them to challenge for the right to fight the kahunas that serve as the major leaders of the region. In this way, the way that gym leaders are assigned, if at all, shows that a lot of thought from higher-ups goes into assigning them and the types they are built to specialize in.
It's not just gym leaders that have to deal with a great number of trainers at once either, as there is a bit of a system both within and above their status in the Pokémon League.
While trainers are required to earn at least 8 badges in order to truly advance in the hierarchy of the Pokémon League, the same goes for the gym leaders themselves, as they are subjected to the same rules in challenging the next major tiers of the league, the Elite Four. It is noted that in some places like the Galar region, though, there is a further division of gym leaders into minor and major circuits, but this is mainly isolated to this region as part of its traditions. Furthermore, it varies from region to region as to whether trainers are able to directly challenge these particular 4 trainers immediately after earning 8 badges, or if they must compete in a tournament to further weed out weaker trainers. This tends to be the case when the number of trainers that can potentially challenge the upper tiers of the league is greater in number, as it helps to keep the Elite Four from having to constantly battle with little room to stop and rest. With that said, the Elite Four serve as 4 of the strongest trainers in a given region, and much like gym leaders, they often have a designated type that they specialize in. However, these trainers are far more skilled in the way they use their Pokemon in battle, and have been recognized for their incredible abilities, going above the norm in a great way. Despite the fact that they rank above gym leaders, getting a position among this otherwise exclusive group is actually a lot easier than becoming a gym leader, because the job's requirements are almost always based on skill and battle prowess and little more, resulting in unscrupulous beings and even children being assigned to these positions simply for being extremely powerful and skilled in their craft. The highest tier in any region is the champion rank, and those that manage to acquire the status do so by being able to beat the entirety of the Elite Four and the current champion of a region, if there even is one. If not, then the 2 top trainers able to accomplish this feat will duke it out to decide who will become champion. This title is incredibly prestigious and incredibly hard to obtain, as only the best trainers in the world will have a fighting chance at besting those advanced trainers one-on-one.
Now, as was already mentioned, a trainer normally only needs to defeat 8 gym leaders and claim the badges to challenge the rest of the Pokémon League, and sometimes there can be more than 8 gyms in a region. However, what is also important to note is that there is likely not going to be a gym for every single town and city in a given region, and that is because there are some actual restrictions in place to make sure that only a limited number of gyms can actually be found in a region.
This mainly comes down to issues of organization, validation, and quality. First of all, the Pokémon League system in any given region is heavily regulated and organized to make sure that it is easy for League officials to tell who each of the region's gym leaders are, what types they specialize in, and most importantly of all, what badges they are meant to give out as a reward for besting them in battle. If there are too many of these badges in existence in a region, it can make things more difficult to keep track of, so it is usually best that League officials make sure that they keep the number of available gyms down to a reasonable number to keep things tidy and concise in processing trainers and their badges. There is also a level of validation needed in order for a badge from a gym leader to actually count within a region's league. This not only means that trainers can only ascend higher in the rankings of trainers within the league if they acquire badges from gym leaders that are only present in the same region, but it also means that there has to be validation given by the league that the badges that a trainer have are the ones that are required for entry. Only a set number of badges count in the league, and they can change with time and as gym leaders either leave the league or otherwise pass the status to another trainer. This is in place to make sure that the badges given to a trainer come from a reputable source, one that has been trusted to act in faith towards the rules and difficulty the league requires of them. Lastly, gym badges are restricted because only certain gyms and the leaders are verified to be able to give high-quality battles that give challengers a genuine fight that they must work hard to overcome and win. Those that go too easy on trainers oftentimes lack the discipline to give trainers a true obstacle to overcome, while others may fight against them with teams that is simply too hard for the fights to be reasonable. Quality and balance are essential here, and thus together form a major attribute that gym leaders must attend to if they want their badges to be recognized as valid by the region's Pokémon League.
On that same token, while it is important that gym leaders stay within a given number in a region as outlined already, the Global Pokémon League has recognized that this system is flawed, in that it doesn't directly give any real wiggle room at face value if a gym leader that is needed for a region's badge roster is suddenly unable to battle or is otherwise retired or deceased.
In these cases, it is within the power of a league to activate reserve or replacement gym leaders in order to take their place. These terms might sound very similar to one another, but in the context of legal operations, they behave very differently and are called upon for different reasons. In cases where a gym leader has decided to retire from their position and is willing to hand over the reins to someone else, or otherwise is choosing to close the gym altogether, reserve gym leaders are called into the fray. These gym leaders almost always live in different towns or cities than the gym leader that is soon to be deposed, and their actions are merely called upon to help the status quo stay as it is, with 8 gym badges needed in order to access a region's Pokémon League, and they in no way are required to move from their home or otherwise specialize in the same type as the gym leader they are taking the place of within the system, though they can if they so choose to. As such, they tend to be a bit more inconvenient for trainers to get access to if they do not live in the same area, but these decisions are usually made formal and are announced ahead of time to officials in a region that can then deliver the news to the public at large. So there is plenty of warning and time for trainers to prepare before the reserve gym leader takes their place and is counted in as part of the official active league. Replacement gym leaders, on the other hand, tend to be a lot less common to see and are only employed if a tragedy results in the death of a gym leader or if they are otherwise rendered unable to attend and commit to their normal duties for other reasons. While this might be a much rarer occurrence, these gym leaders tend to be much easier for officials and trainers alike to deal with, as they are indeed replacing the former leader of a gym, and thus must still maintain the same type as the former gym leader and live and operate within the same gym. However, they are more than happy to make their fights different from other leaders and can use their own Pokémon by choice, so they do have some flexibility to what they can do, and thus tend to fit into the replacement positions just fine with little issues from locals and challengers.
With all the battling that often takes place in gyms between gym leaders and challengers, one would think then that their lives fully revolve around their duties as a gym leader, and to some extent, this would be a correct assumption. At the same time, though, there is much more to being a gym leader than simply fighting challengers, as in truth, the position of gym leader is both a leadership role and one that clearly defines the leaders as employees of the Pokémon League.
While the exact channels of operation vary from region to region, in many cases, the gym leaders in a region are employed directly by the league itself, and thus there are rules and regulations, many of which we have already stated here, that they have to follow to keep their employed status. In some cases, however, they can instead be directed by members of a region's Elite Four, or even the champion of a region, and in these cases, the process for vetting and keeping them employed are a bit more difficult compared to the more bureaucratic processes that exist within the league itself. This sort of direct employment might seem simpler on paper, but in truth it can oftentimes be a harsher experience for gym leaders, as they may be scrutinized by the actions of a few or even a single individual, rather than a system of officials and peers, and are under duty to perform their duties as directed by the smaller control group.
The leeway that many higher officials in this position have in choosing how their employees operate can be stressful to some and even go against league rules in some cases. The Power region is a noble example of this, as while one of the gym leaders of the region, Larry, normally serves as a normal type gym leader in the region, he is often called to pull double duty by his employer Gita, the top champion of the region, and act as a flying type specialist for the region's Elite Four as well, something that would normally be considered illegal in other regions.
As far as gym duties go, however, aside from making sure that a gym is kept clean and in working condition for any and all trainers that come through its door, gym leaders often have additional duties for the league they are employed in, like participating in local community events and interacting with other people in the home in order to promote both themselves and the league as a whole, and a lot of these duties are mandatory for employment. Although some manage to skirt the line and avoid these sorts of duties with either bribes or other dubious tactics. Thankfully, despite their constant employment, gym leaders usually have time to engage in hobbies and other events at their leisure, so while it might seem like a chore of a job in some ways, it is still one where funded employment still allows gym leaders to be the person they wish to be and indulge in whatever has their interest.
As one final note for the work that gym leaders undertake with their efforts, it is worth stating that, while in the main game series there is a general idea of where you're supposed to go next between gym leaders based on the level and power of the Pokémon, we have to take into account that even if the Goldenrod City Gym, as an example, might be the third gym that one is supposed to challenge in the Generation 2 games and remakes, for someone living in that town or city, it likely would be their first since it is literally near the place they call home.
In cases like that, one would think that the local gym leader would have an unfair advantage against these younger trainers, but there is a special provision that allows gym leaders to actually use different Pokémon of varying experience levels in order to adjust for trainers that might be approaching them at a time that might otherwise seem out of order relative to the main series games. Gym leaders being tasked to take care of trainers of all experience levels with a wide variety of Pokémon helps to accommodate for this geographic issue, as it ensures that challengers will still be able to get the challenge they seek from a fight without it being too unfair or even potentially too easy for them. This further gives gym leaders the chance to develop their best teams at all levels of experience to make the most of the Pokémon they have access to, and in turn can develop unique strategies with their Pokémon that can then be applied to more powerful fighters in their possession to make the best possible teams at their disposal for the most serious of fights. This also means that they can qualify for league activities as well, alongside any other challengers to the gyms, even to the point of potentially elevating themselves to higher positions in the league if they can prove themselves to be a legit challenge. So even if it might be a bit of a hassle to have to develop teams of varying power levels and experience to keep a gym fit for all, the potential benefits that can come from it are usually worth the hassle for most. The life of a gym leader might seem to be a glamorous one and strived for by many, but the system that has been put in place to make them and their jobs possible is nonetheless needed in order for the sport and trade of competitive battling to maintain a position of stability and fairness for all. There is much to the work of a gym leader and their employment, and operations can seem messy at times, but their efforts are nonetheless important and help to build and keep communities thriving wherever Pokémon battles may be taking place. So the next time you take a stroll out to a local gym or one in a town nearby, make sure that you show your appreciation for the work that's gone into making them sustainable, as it helps to make the act of battling both entertaining and an exhilarating adventure for all those that wish to be a part of it.
That's it for now, so I'll see you all on the next episode of the VTP. Thank you all for watching this video. It always brings me great joy to see others enjoying the work I do to try and make the world of Pokemon and the fascinating creatures that lay inside of it feel as real as they possibly can. If you really enjoy my work, please feel free to leave a comment and subscribe, as I always do my best to respond to any and all comments that are left on my videos. In addition, if you wish to learn more about my work and help support it, you can find links to my Patreon page, as well as email and other contact information to my work on DeviantArt in the video description down below. Furthermore, you can find a link to my Discord server there as well if you'd like to get a first glimpse at what videos are coming up next and converse with other fans of the world of Pokemon. Thank you for taking the time to watch this, and have a wonderful rest of your day.